So let's go. Afternoon, Trevor. How are you?
I'm well, thanks, Nige. Good to hear you.
Good to see you. Tell us, for people that don't know you who will see this video, can you please tell us about your role for the FIC and put in with that what's encouraged you in the churches in London within the last year?
Okay. Well, name is Trevor Archer. I'm married to Val, and for many years I was one of the pastors at Chessington Evangelical. For the last 10 years I've been working for FIC, which is the Fellowship of Independent Evangelical Churches. It's a bit of a mouthful, but it's basically says what happens. And it's a fellowship of 650 churches nationwide. More recently, having done the training role, I've become the London director. Within London, there are something like 75 FIC churches that are found in the inner urban estates, inner London, and in the suburbs and everything in between in terms of size and makeup of those churches and ethnic mixes. So it's a reflection of London in its complexity and diversity. So my role is essentially to try and keep an eye on those 75 churches, to particularly care for their leaders, but also to work in partnership with other evangelicals in London to try and encourage a culture of generosity. We're in the 21st century, massive opportunities and needs for the gospel, but we are a minority in the land, and we're a minority in London, and we need to work together with fellow evangelicals to see churches planted and churches revitalized. You asked about what's encouragement?
Yep, please.
Yeah, I think it's that very thing of revitalization. It's very much on my agenda. Being involved in a church plant at the Globe in central London, and obviously knowing about the church plant at Emmanuel Epsom. Church planting is great. It's been very much on the agenda for the last 10, 15 years amongst churches. But I think there's a danger that we miss the opportunity that a church revitalization is. It's much harder work, but church revitalizations have this benefit that church plants don't. One, they have history in the area. People know them. Mm-hmm. Two, they have a building. Three, they most often have a manse to house a minister. And four, this whole history aspect would mean that you might knock on the door in the neighborhood and people would say, well, I'm from this local church here. They would know, and they would say, oh yeah, I used to go to Sunday school there, whatever. You haven't got that as a church plant. You've not even got a building. You haven't got that identity. Now, we know the church is the big people, but there is something about having the solidness, the practical building in an area that gives you a sense of permanence there. So there are a number of FIC churches and other churches in dire need of revitalization. One of the really exciting ones in the last year for me has been to be part of working with people like Brian Edwards in bringing about the merger of Stockwell Baptist Church, which was an Afro-Caribbean, mainly elderly congregation of about 70 people. And they've merged last September with Brixton Local Church, Block as it's known, mm-hmm. which is a church plant done in the last 5 years by commission, and is basically about 35 young black adults, 35 years and under. And the two have come together. There's a mutual benefit in that. They're now meeting in the building of Stockwell Baptist, which is a superb building on the South Lambeth Road, under the leadership of an excellent young British Nigerian leader called Yannick Christophe. And it's just exciting to see the potential there being fulfilled. Mm-hmm. The elderly congregation loved the Lord, they loved his word, they loved one another, but they were totally out of context and totally out of contact with their community. And the infusion of young adults has just revolutionized that, and it's very exciting to see that. Mm. I think there's many other opportunities for such revitalizations, and they're long work, they're hard work, but I think the fruit of it and the benefits is something we've got to work at, because we can't lose these buildings. Mm-hmm. They are vitally important for the generations to come.
Yeah, that's very, very helpful. Everybody's talking about COVID-19 and rightly so. It's important, unique cultural moment. As a church leader, could you give us a broader angled perspective? What would you see as some of the opportunities and challenges there are in the current climate for the gospel? What would you see?
I think the opportunities are the obvious ones, and you can already see the beginning of churches taking those opportunities, just reaching out to their street, reaching out to their local communities, people setting up WhatsApp groups just for their neighborhood, people knocking on neighbors' doors, making sure they're okay, that kind of thing. We're going to be in this for a while, aren't we? And there's a huge opportunity here to show Christian care, compassion, and with that, the opportunity to share the gospel because of the COVID issue and the imminence of death. Now, that's both an opportunity but a huge challenge, because I think the challenge in that is to have the kind of conversation about the gospel that we would want to have. It's notoriously difficult to try and do that. Val and I were just talking about that today. You kind of, a neighbor will just say something, you think, but you miss the opportunity. And you want to say, there's a worse thing than COVID. And that's to fall into the hands of the living God, as the Bible puts it, without being ready to meet the one who is your Lord and your judge. And yet that same Lord and judge has come to rescue us. That's the wonderful news. And that's the heart of the gospel that we want to share with people, the whole thing of repentance and faith. So great opportunities to show love, compassion and care, but a great challenge actually where I think we need to be helping one another to, how do we have those conversations? What kind of conversations have worked for us that take us beyond a kind of therapeutic gospel, which is the danger, to say, no, something's, we've all got this contagious disease called sin. And it's so awful that every single one of us is going to die with it. And worse than that, we're going to meet the one who has made us and created us and has sent his son to rescue us. And what are we going to do about that? What are we going to say about that? So it's this aspect of training and helping one another to share the gospel in a way that it's not you're discarded as a kind of weirdo, or you just jump in inappropriately, but find ways of saying, well, have you ever thought about, death is near? What about your own death? The hope that I have is this. I mean, it may simply be giving your testimony, but being ready to give it in a very clear and coherent but sharp way that points to these very elements of sin and rebellion and repentance and faith, and all based in the wonderful provision of God through his son Jesus, his death and resurrection, the hope that we have.
That's very helpful, very helpful. I want to hit you with one last question, if I may. You've been in pastoral ministry for a long time, 20 plus years at Tissington Evangelical Church. Could you help us think about how we can help vulnerable people in our congregations? We're going to be in lockdown for quite a while, we expect. It's uncertain times, it's unprecedented, but how can we love our people well as pastors of churches?
Thank you. That's a really key issue. Just one or two observations. I think the biggest danger is that we are likely to miss the most genuinely vulnerable amongst us, who are not just the elderly, but are people that perhaps have long-term mental health issues, and that can be any age, or people that aren't likely to make too much of a fuss about things or be too demanding, and yet maybe say that they are a bit older, but they're on their own, they're single, they might be widows, widowers, single people, and so on. Just making sure, I think this is a great thing about life groups, or home groups, whatever one wants to call them, is that so many, it seems to me, in this past week have really got their act together through things like this, through Zoom, through other means, Skype, to be in contact with each other on a very regular basis, which is probably far more so than we normally do. It's within that, though, is to recognise there's loads of people that won't be tech savvy, that won't be so easily accessible, but would be on the end of a phone, or if it's at all possible, you might be able to visit, that kind of thing. It is this issue of people that find themselves in that place, and sometimes they've been there long term. I think also there's going to be a danger, secondly, of just being cooped up in your house, isn't it? It's just not healthy for anybody, whatever your current mental health condition. And so I think it's just being very practical and wise about, taking the opportunity to take a walk if we can, just switching off into other things, not being kind of so super spiritual, thinking I've wasted the day because I haven't spent 23 hours of it in prayer and so on, when I'm just at home. All the things we said we'd do if I had the time, we've got the time, we're not actually doing them.
Yes.
But actually we're doing probably far more than we normally do in terms of our spiritual lives and our care for one another. So don't beat yourself up. Just take the opportunity to encourage one another. Just be natural, just be healthily normal about it, and look out for one another.
Yeah. And how are you finding being locked up?
Oh, I'm going cuckoo. My wife's going cuckoo. I hope to still be alive by the time this new broadcast is done. If you're ringing up and you're told I'm not available, I want you to send the police round.
And on that note, we'll leave it. Trev, as ever, that's helpful. We'll stop before we incriminate ourselves. God bless you. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Take care. God bless.
Bye-bye.